most people are not the perfect hero of their own life. Everyone really deals with vices or bad habits or, not being the perfect version of themselves. And so when we see someone who's they ultimately want to do the right thing, but they are also struggling with a lot and juggling a lot of different things.
I want to protect the people I put in harm's way.
We connect with that.
We're sisters, best friends, and authors on a mission to help you stoke your creative fire and live the life of your dreams. We believe that purpose fuels passion and that creativity is your secret weapon for mass construction. There's never been a better time to bless the world with your dream realized. You're listening to The Kate and Abby Show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Kate and Abby Show. Do you ever wonder what makes you fall in love with a hero in a story or a protagonist of any kind in any story? What is that magic secret ingredient behind every character that you've ever fallen in love with and rooted for that makes them so lovable? What makes them so... What captures your attention? What captures your heart? That's the question that Kate and I are exploring in today's episode, and we're going to explore the topic of flawed heroes and how flaws actually make your characters more relatable, more lovable, and make you want to see them succeed despite their weaknesses and their imperfections. So, we're going to dive into this topic today, and this is a special episode of The Kate and Abby Show because it's a story mining episode. So we're going to be exploring different stories that me and Kate personally love and kind of pulling apart the science behind them, the science behind what makes these protagonists so lovable, what makes us want to see them succeed and root for them. So that's what we're going to be diving into in today's episode. It's going to be good. But first, we have to thank our sponsors, who are you guys. You are the ones who support this show and keep it going, and we so appreciate your support. So if you get value out of this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abby Show and help us keep this podcast alive and free of interruptions. Okay, let's dive right into it. I know we have 3 story examples today that we're going to be exploring, but there are so many stories to choose from. Kate and I had a hard time choosing just 3, but we like to talk about different stories, and we like to bring new stories to the table to discuss. New stories,
different genres. We really tried to find different genres because a lot of times we're recommending things that are more BBC productions and things like that because that's primarily what we watch. But we also wanted to delve into, a diversity of genres here for those of you who are into, different things, not just British drama.
Yes.
But of course, we'll be bringing some British dramas to the table today. For sure. But so flaws in your main character, so important because that's what makes us feel their humanity. That's what makes us feel connected to them. That's what has us rooting for them. We don't really feel connected to someone who has no flaws, no imperfections, because we all have flaws and imperfections. And when we can relate to the humanity of your character, of the protagonist, it has us rooting for them. It has us feeling like we're in their shoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So true. You have to be able to relate to them because if they're just like this perfect, moral, absolutely no flaws, no weaknesses, never does anything wrong, and you can't relate to that, it's like it's like this perfect ideal, and it's not, it doesn't have that human quality like what it saying. Comes
off as feeling is just like a flat character. Like there's just something missing, and you might not even know what it is. You might be like, why is it that I just don't really like this character? I don't really even care about them. And it's probably because that they do everything perfectly and have absolutely no flaws whatsoever. And so that makes them completely unrelatable to any human being on the planet.
Yeah, which is funny. It's kind of contradictory because a lot of times writers who are first starting out think, okay, my protagonist has to be, my hero of the story has to be, perfectly morally upstanding and no flaws. They're basically just a bottle of hand sanitizer in the form of a human, and there's nothing wrong with them. They have no weaknesses because they're the hero and they have to be good. They have to be fundamentally good in everything they do. But that doesn't necessarily make us fall in love with them and want to see them go on a journey and succeed and get what they want and learn and become a better person. Like, they can't become a better person and they can't change for the better if they're already perfect.
Exactly.
Right?
So it's like, if you have a perfect character per se, it's like the makings of a flat character arc.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so, like, an example we immediately thought of that so many of you will know right away is Iron Man.
There's been speculation that I'm parading around as a superhero. I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
And this is one of Marvel's most popular heroes.
And most loved.
Yeah, and for good reason. When we sat down and watched Iron Man, actually recently was the first time I ever saw it because I just was late to the party on that and I had never watched it before. And so we watched it together and we started picking apart, like, what is it that's drawing you in? And it's 100% the character.
Yeah. Yeah, the opening of the film, honestly, the first Iron Man movie really surprised me because I was expecting kind of the format of that I've seen in the MCU a lot, of the big chunk of narration at the beginning with showing the enemy and the, kind of a disembodied voice explaining some world building, some other forces of power elsewhere, but it didn't do any of that. And I'm like, wow, I love the structure of this so much that it just started right out of the gate with our main protagonist, Tony Stark. We get to know him. We understand who he is as a person. We see his weaknesses, his flaws right away. Like, within the first 10 minutes, all of that is established. And it has kind of a cool format, which I won't even go into like all the story structure elements, but it has kind of a cool format that it starts with the inciting incident and then rewinds.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent because it really draws you right in to, like, why does this matter right now? And then we'll flash back to it a little bit. But if it started linearly, it would lag.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as engaging, for sure.
It wouldn't be as engaging.
You don't know, like, where is this going? When you know where it's going, it makes it even more interesting, which is just kind of a cool thing to make note of as a writer. Playing with story structure and when to show your inciting incident, when to introduce your character's internal conflict and flaws. But really, it's the flaws of his character that I think make him so lovable.
Right.
Which is funny and kind of contradictory because you think, okay, when he starts the story, he's kind of a morally gray character as far as has a lot of weaknesses, has a lot of vices.
Is it better to be feared or respected? And I say, is it too much to ask for both?
Sashimi, you are constitutionally incapable of being responsible.
It would be irresponsible not to drink. I'm just talking about a nightcap.
Hot sake?
Yes, two, please.
No, just...
He's not the perfect hero by any means, but that is what sets up the story of the journey of change.
What happened over there?
I have my eyes open.
I want to protect the people I put in harm's way.
Right, and that's also what connects people, the viewer, to him as a character, because most people are not the perfect hero of their own life. Everyone really deals with, vices or bad habits or, not being, the perfect version of themselves. And so when we see someone who's they ultimately want to do the right thing, but they are also struggling with a lot and juggling a lot of different things. And there's not necessarily a clear answer to every one of their questions. And so we connect with that.
Yeah. For sure. I thought it was very well done. I feel like it was the most by the original story than a lot of the MCU films, but I'm not sure because I have not read any of the comics or the original stories.
Yeah, I haven't either.
But I thought that was very well executed in the first Iron Man film, how we get to know the character, the protagonist right away and see his internal conflict, see his flaws, and don't ever really leave the perspective, which is another thing that I have not seen much of in the MCU, but I love that storytelling method of really staying, it's kind of like close point of view or deep point of view in writing, is staying in the perspective of the main protagonist and really seeing everything from their perspective.
And not head hopping to the villain.
Yeah.
I think the only time they did that was quite deep into the film.
Right.
But a lot of times in lots of Marvel films and also just that genre in general. You see lots of head hopping to this villain and that villain and then this sub character, and there's just so much head hopping that you don't have the opportunity necessarily in a lot of cases to get into that deep point of view and feel that connected to the main protagonist.
Right, which is just another way to really connect with their internal conflict and their flaws, their misbeliefs about the world and about themselves. Because if you're jumping all over the place and your focus is so broad and so distracted, you won't have time to forge that deeper connection between the protagonist and the audience. Right. And that's really a precious moment in the course of the story or the film or whatever it is you're creating. That window of time where you are first establishing who the protagonist is and what they're struggling with and connecting the audience to their internal struggle. That really needs to be, you really need to keep your focus on the protagonist during that time period of the story, whatever it may be. If it's the first half, the first third, whatever. And then once you're introducing the villain, you can like head hop over to them, but we have to see the connection. It's kind of like I was talking about in my video on subplots that I posted a couple weeks ago, how you have to see the direct connection of why what's happening with this side character matters to the protagonist that we care about. But first, of course, you have to make a protagonist that we care about. And that starts with making a protagonist with flaws. And like, there's a reason why Tony Stark is one of the best loved characters in the MCU. Exactly. And he's one of the most flawed characters, arguably, in the MCU, which I find so interesting, that there is so much love and support around these characters, mostly the characters who are struggling with the most.
Right. And what flaws really breed within a character is great internal conflict.
Yes,
and
exactly.
The character of Tony Stark has amazing internal conflict that drives the entire story forward. That's really what drives the story, is his internal conflict.
Yeah.
All of his decisions are being made based on his internal conflict.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be alive. Unless it was for a reason. I'm not crazy, Pepper. I just finally know what I have to do. And I know in my heart that it's right.
And also I feel like in that film particularly, there were more weak moments for the protagonist than arguably any other MCU film that I've personally seen. Which I think it just creates more strength in the ending for the protagonist's journey when you show those weak moments where they are struggling, they are maybe on the brink of losing the fight, and those moments actually make your character stronger. It makes your storytelling stronger. And a lot of writers think, oh, well, I can't make my protagonist weak because I'm trying to make them strong. Yeah, but fighting through the weakness, fighting through those moments where they almost lose the game, they almost fail, they almost die even, those are the moments that really shape your character and make them stronger.
Exactly.
I am Iron Man.
And like another example, and this is from a TV series that Abby and I love called The Musketeers.
Nothing more we can do for him. He knows the Musketeer motto. Every man for himself.
If you haven't had a chance to check it out, we highly recommend it because it has some great storytelling, and a lot of the storytelling is based on principles that we've talked about on this show. We also included the Musketeers in the episode we did about how to craft an excellent villain. And
yes, definitely check that one out. That's another story mining episode you guys will like.
Really good episode.
Yes.
And the character of Milady de Winter being an excellent villain for kind of the same reasons that the four main protagonists of the Musketeers are excellent flawed heroes.
I still carry the token of your love. You couldn't stay to see your beloved wife choking on the end of a rope.
Yeah, it's kind of the same. It's kind of like reverse engineered. Mm-hmm. Because each of the Musketeers, Athos, Porthos, Aramis, and D'Artagnan, all all are incredibly flawed characters. They all have great internal conflict because of their flaws.
Yeah.
My name is D'Artagnan of Lupiac in Gascony. Prepare to fight. One of us dies here.
Now that's the way to make an entrance.
You cheated.
Porthos.
If you love me, you'll jump. Aman, how wonderful to see you.
And that's what makes you feel connected to them. They're not these perfect heroes that are super polished and they're just constantly making the right choice. That would make the show incredibly boring to watch, first of all.
Yeah.
But each character, it's so masterfully done because they take time. Even though if you look at the amount of time, it's really not that much, but it's meaningful, mindfully chosen amounts of time to allow us to see what each of the Musketeers are struggling with and what makes them flawed. They have weaknesses, they make mistakes, and that's what makes us feel their humanity.
Yeah. And it's also what creates, I think, a better connection between the characters
Yes.
and like relationships that we can really fall in love with. Same thing with the Avengers, actually, but we won't even go into that in this episode.
Right.
But the relationships between your characters, there's some magic there when you start exploring the flaws of each character, you know, like the thing that they're known for having a weakness in or whatever.
Right.
And this is something that I was analyzing quite recently, actually, several months ago. And I was analyzing the Musketeers, kind of breaking it down and trying to figure out, okay, what's the science? Why do we love seeing these characters interact so much? And it's like funny to, you know, make memes with screen captures of the show. And I've seen so many memes for the Musketeers and for the Avengers and other series. And I'm like, there's some little magic quality here, you know, that you see in certain shows where the characters have this great camaraderie. They have this great
Chemistry.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Chemistry between them. And that chemistry, I think, starts from each character having their own flaws, having their own internal conflict, having something that, you know, the other characters can maybe pick on them for, or they learn their secrets and now they're they have this special bond.
You know you were giving her the stare.
She's a very attractive woman.
She's not a woman. She's the queen.
But if they're all perfect and they're all, you know, perfect characters who aren't struggling with anything, that opportunity for that bonding doesn't really happen.
Yeah, those layers aren't there anymore.
Right.
And I think, yeah, you're right on. Absolutely. That adds just such a different dynamic to it.
Yeah.
And it also works especially well when you have a broader cast for protagonists, because when you look at a show like The Musketeers, or when you look at movies like The Avengers, where it's not just about one hero, it's about multiple heroes. Okay, when you're writing, and this is especially, I think, true in like action, adventure, and fantasy stuff like that, where you commonly see that there's like a whole gang of heroes together, a whole gang of protagonists that we're following, to have those flaws to make the relationships interesting and meaningful, like you were just saying. So I think what we're talking about here applies especially to if you have multiple protagonists.
Yes.
And adding those layers and those dimensions.
Yeah. Like a group setting. Yeah. And I think a lot of writers struggle with that because it is difficult at first. But if you can create this unique internal conflict for each character and then build relationships between the characters based on their internal conflict, it creates that magic element.
What was that for?
To see how it would feel. Felt good.
It's so special because it makes your reader fall in love with the interactions, not just with the characters, you know, and they look forward to and anticipate moments when these characters will be thrown together in some situation. And you kind of can predict the outcome of it because you know, oh, this character has this vice, oh, this character has this flaw.
Exactly.
And then they have to work together. This is going to be a problem. And it's funny, it's interesting to see that dynamic unfold because you feel like you're friends with these people.
Yeah, it creates anticipation.
Yeah.
It makes it more dynamic.
Whereas if they don't have these unique struggles, it's just like, oh, they could be anybody, you know, any red shirt guy, as we like to say, which is illustration from the original Star Trek series,
right?
When they go to explore a new planet, you always know which guys are going to get picked off by the enemy because they're wearing red shirts,
right? Yeah,
but true. So it's like, you know, this 2-dimensional character that we don't need to learn about. We don't ever learn about their internal conflict because they're just going to get, you know, killed or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, and so
avoid that.
Avoid it for sure. And so like having those different dynamics at play there, like the different vices, the different weaknesses, you can anticipate like, oh, this is going to be so interesting to see what happens with that character and this character and whatever. And it works great for relationships too. Romantic interests, having those flaws, that's what makes it addictive. Like you see, you know, so many series that were successful, it was because the characters were flawed. And that leads us to our third example, which is another BBC production. This was a PBS masterpiece that aired very recently, actually, in the past few months or something, called Around the World in 80 Days. And I was super stoked about this because I'm a huge Jules Verne fan. And this is the first miniseries I've ever seen for Around the World in 80 Days. And it was just so fantastically done.
Phileas Fogg, you may have heard of me.
Papers?
Yes?
Then let the adventure begin.
That series is a perfect example of exactly what we're talking about. The flaws of the characters is actually the thing propelling the whole story forward.
Right.
Because when we open with the character of Phileas Fogg, he's an incredibly tormented, flawed character who has kind of been stuck in one place his whole life because of his own inability to move forward, his own inability to understand what he even wants out of life and to go get it. He is very flawed, and that's really what sparks the whole journey.
Yeah.
The flaw sparks the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he finally becomes so fed up with always giving in to this insecurity he's carried around with him for so long that he just snaps. That's it. I'm going to take this journey. I'm going to go around the world in 80 days.
Pain versus pain.
Pain versus pain, yeah.
It's a great impossible choice moment.
It is a really good impossible choice
And it happens
moment.
really quickly, too, into the first episode, which I was surprised and pleasantly surprised. And I was like, oh, this is really good. Like, it drew me in right away. The structure of the story, again, starting really quickly with the inciting incident is always a good idea. Showing us the character's internal conflict and then shoving them outside their comfort zone. And we see Fogg make the impossible choice, and he decides that staying in one place is more painful than going on this potentially hazardous adventure. And so he sets off on the adventure.
Nothing can stop us now.
No! There's a fly in my actual eye! An actual fly in my eye!
Alongside a couple of travel companions who also are very flawed and just well-written characters, very well-written. Both of them, all three of them, as they go on their adventure together, kind of have individual character arcs, but their character arcs coincide and kind of interweave with each other, which I thought was really well done.
My companions, Abigail Fix, journalist.
I'm here to cover your progress for the Daily Telegraph.
What? No. Oh, no.
And Passepartout.
Someone tried to kill you.
No.
Each episode brings you to a new place. They go on a journey in each episode and kind of arrive at a new place, not just physically, but kind of internally, with their characters.
Yes, there was a character arc in each episode.
Yeah.
Whether it was all three of them.
Exactly.
Or one specific character.
Yeah.
Like you see that Fogg will have a moment, Passepartout will have a moment, Abigail Fix will have a moment, and it's just like this, either a moment of revelation or a complete character arc that character has, or all three of them through their interactions and through usually an external force causing an actual physical problem, like they're unable to travel forward. So they all have to face this problem, and we know that, there's all these like different dynamics at play and secrets they're keeping from each other and different motivations. What's actually motivating each of them to even be on this journey together is different for each of them. So you are interested to see, how are they each going to face this problem based off their own internal conflict and based off of their flaws that they're dealing with themselves.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think another thing that was well done in that show was the establishment of the goal, not just the goal of we have to get around the world in 80 days, like that's the obvious goal, but little goals that appeared throughout the series, throughout the course of the journey. And there were some goals that were accomplished and then new goals arose. How Miss Fix has the goal when she first sets out to kind of prove something to her father and to also everybody, because she's trying to be a published journalist. She wants to make a name for herself, and you can relate to her desire there, her goal. But as she goes on the journey, her goal shifts because she discovers new things about herself and about her father and her relationship with him. And it kind of changes her perspective on life and on her, what she should really be seeking.
It's actually a great example too of all the characters at the outset are actually going on the journey because of their misbelief.
Yeah, exactly.
And then through the journey they let go of their misbelief,
right,
and then take on a new motivation for why they're even doing this. And so they not only are these character arcs happening, but the actual arc of the plot is going right along with it, and they're transforming at this midpoint.
Yeah.
And taking on a new tone to the entire story as they go. It's so good.
It is really good. And the relationships are so great. I love the bond that happens between Passepartout and Fogg is so fun to watch.
It is.
Just their whole journey together and how they eventually become really good friends. And it's just, and all three of them really.
Yeah.
Miss Fix and her character arc is really great as well. Just the dynamic of all of their relationships is really very well written, and it brings different layers of theme through the subplots. I was actually almost going to use it as an example when I did my live training on subplots, because it's a great example of how the subplots matter because of how they all are in on this one goal together. They have this main central conflict that's bringing them all together. And so we know why we're following each one of these characters.
Right.
It's very obvious to us. And we get to know each character because of their relationships with each other.
Yeah.
So it's a great masterclass in subplots as well.
It is. And also the consistency of not head hopping too much, not going to the villain for unnecessary amounts of time, only going to the villain when it matters to the main character.
Yes.
They nailed that. Perfect. Yes. Perfect. And so we go watch it if you haven't already, because it's excellent. There's so many great storytelling elements at play in that series.
And the soundtrack is so good.
Yeah, the soundtrack is great.
I love the soundtrack. I've listened to the soundtrack so much.
Yeah, and the opening Hans Zimmer did with another composer.
Yes.
Excellent. Super, super good. But yeah, so to recap, Iron Man, great example of a super flawed character, but a super lovable character. A character someone can connect with and root for, and that you can't wait to see what's going to happen next. You can't wait to see how he's going to handle something. And the moments where, tragedy happens, you just feel everything the main character is feeling. You feel completely in the skin of that character. You feel like you're experiencing everything with them because of their flaws. The Musketeers, a great example of how to use flaws to create great friendship and chemistry between characters that creates a bond between the characters that will have that just addictive feeling. You can't wait to watch how these characters are going to interact in different situations. It keeps you coming back for more and more. And not only that, it makes them feel like much more realistic heroes that you can relate to, not just bottles of hand sanitizer characters, as you said earlier, that we can't relate to, but it feels totally realistic. And Around the World in 80 Days, characters that are flawed, who are setting out on a journey together, and you're just watching how everything's going to unfold and anticipating every single event based on the flaws of each character, the internal conflict of each character. Great example of misbeliefs driving a character forward, which misbeliefs are some of our greatest flaws, really. Yeah. Things that we hold as a misbelief, and how we can unravel that, how characters can unravel their own misbeliefs together, and at the same time create a great story.
Yeah, 100%. Well said. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed watching us kind of unpick this, story mine all of these examples, and discover new layers to storytelling and how we can improve our own writing. Comment below and tell us what you thought of this episode. We would love to hear your take on it. We'd also love to hear some of your favorite story examples of flawed heroes. So share those with us. We'd love to discuss them with you. Thank you guys again for watching, for listening. Give us a nice rating, give us a thumbs up, and thank you again to our amazing patrons who make this show possible. We couldn't do it without you guys. If you enjoy this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abby Show and help support us and keep us going. We love you guys so much, and we will see you in the next one. Until then,
stay stoked
and rock on.